Welcome, everyone, to our May edition of PowerHug, our healthcare user group. My name is Scott Dwyer. I'm a solution engineer in our AI business process business unit here at Microsoft, and one of your hosts for this Power Platform user group focused on healthcare and life sciences. If you're new to the group, we're a community for Power Platform admins, makers, and users to really learn from one another and from Microsoft, as we're going to hear today. We do need presenters going through the summer, so fourth Thursday of every month. I'll put a caveat that that's always flexible, so if you're interested, please do reach out. Some topics listed there. We're really open to a lot of things. So what you've learned, how you got there, specific use cases, anything and everything in between. We post these all on YouTube at Power Platform Hug after the fact. And we have a LinkedIn group where we post all our upcoming events, and we're happy to field questions, comments, concerns as you see fit there as well. We do like to cover just a couple of other events in the Microsoft world that might be applicable to you all. You'll notice we're a little light today, and I think that might be correlated with our fiscal year coming to an end. But we've got one more PowerCat webinar coming up. Real-world agent case studies through storytelling, and you can register for that webinar from that link there. You can also find previously recorded webinars from our PowerCat team. If you're not familiar with them, that's our customer advisory team, a bunch of incredibly bright folks that work directly with customers. So we get a lot of really valuable content out of them. And these webinars are a great way to engage regardless of your status as a customer. So I encourage you to utilize that resource. We also have Build coming up next week. Happens to be that same date. If you're not familiar with Microsoft Build, it's one of our major release conferences of the year. So if you're able to attend some of it, I encourage you to do so live. If you're not, there's always some great kind of debrief content from the community and from our MVPs. You might even see us talking about it next month on PowerHug if we don't find a customer to present. It is a very, very exciting time at Microsoft, and our pace has never been faster. So really encourage you. These are becoming like can't miss events with all the kind of AI announcements in the direction of the business. So always very excited for these, especially once we get a week out and the rumors start to swirl here at Microsoft. I think it's going to be a really fun, very exciting event. And then we are starting to talk about the Power Platform Community Conference. This will be the 5th annual. I think we got up to about 8,000 attendees last year. We're aiming for 10 this year. We are trying to push this venue to its absolute limits. This is a fantastic event. I would say it's the premier Power Platform event in the world. It actually was where the idea for the Power Platform Healthcare User Group PowerHug was born when we had a roundtable a few years back. And you can start to register for this now. If you are a customer of Microsoft, you may be able to solicit passes from us. I can't make promises on that front, but it's worth asking your account team or your specialist team. I also encourage you to, if you are booking just your hotel at least through the registration website. They get like the equivalent of a room block that can help you save a few bucks on your travel and expense. Really great opportunity to meet Randall, Amber, and I, as well as some Microsoft product team members, a bunch of what I will call Power Platform famous or YouTube famous MVPs and things of that nature, kind of a who's who of everybody Power Platform. And if you have any questions about this, I'm happy to field them. You can reach out directly on LinkedIn, emails first name, last name at Microsoft, so whatever makes sense for you. And with that, I want to introduce Amber Weise, who's coming to us from the Houston AI Tour, one of the events that we have previously teased. She's going to be talking about reimagining the automation spectrum. And Amber is one of our specialists who is a global black belt. So we affectionately claim that that's the coolest title at Microsoft. But really what it means is she is a very specialized resource that works with a ton of our customers. And specifically, the topic today is about how kind of AI has really, I would say, evolved and up-leveled our pitch on automation. We've got the QA enabled, we've got the chat enabled. If there's any questions throughout, please feel free to post them there. I will help Amber to manage that. And we'll have this up on YouTube after the fact if anybody's not able to attend the whole thing. So with that, Amber, I will let you take over. And just a last thank you for being here, especially from Houston.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me. So thanks for the introduction, Scott. Just by way of quick introduction on my end, Amber Weise, as Scott mentioned, part of the Power Platform Global Black Belt team. But basically, I get to focus on our most strategic customers and how they're implementing the technology. I work a lot with our healthcare folks, so work closely with Scott and Randall, and many of you I'm sure I've seen before. So today I'm, like I said, joining you from the Houston AI tours. I'm actually going to shut my video down and save a little bandwidth here, but I'm going to take over the slides. And I wanted to get the conversation started around what the next level of, or the next evolution of AI and automation is going to look like. So to get us started here, really thinking about how is agentic AI going to revolutionize and change what we're doing in our existing automation stack, and where can it add that new benefit, and where is it going to play a role into our larger Power Platform world? And so to kick us off here, really, I'm going to start with the non-Microsoft viewpoint. Both Gartner and Forrester are signaling a same shift in automation. They both separately put something out to say, hey, businesses aren't really evaluating tools for individual capabilities as much as they used to, right? Where we used to say, hey, I'm looking for a very specific RPA tool. I'm looking for a very specific AI or API-based automation tool, or what, any of those components. They're really looking for consolidated platforms. And if you've heard Randall or Scott or I talk about the Power Platform before, you know that has been one of our key advantages of the platform. But really back to what Gartner and Forrester said, they both come up with their own terms for this. Gartner's calling it business orchestration and automation technologies, or BOAT. Forrester is calling this adaptive process orchestration. All in all, to say, analysts are moving away from individually looking at these categories and looking for a consolidated platform, because really, in order to solve a business problem, you don't need a hammer or a wrench. You need a tool belt that's got everything that could potentially address those problems. So like I mentioned, Power Platform has been positioned to be one of these platforms that's going to help you solve all of your problems, no matter what those problems look like. So if you need a UI, great, we've got Power Apps and Power Pages. If you need some, if you want to create like an agentic solution, we've got Copilot Studio. If you want to do RPA, we've got Power Automate Desktop. Oh, and by the way, we've got it all wrapped in this beautiful governance and security platform that allows us to make sure we can govern all of this at scale. And so this is really continues to be a strategic platform for Microsoft as we look at how do we allow people to move faster, and even faster now that we're in the world of AI. So I want to give you my viewpoint. This is a slide that I've created based on some of the feedback we're seeing from analysts and from leadership right now around what does the modern automation spectrum look like? And really what this is illustrating is the types of automations you're going to have in your business. So I'll go through these and kind of talk about where the platform sits. And then, we can dive into that a little bit further along the way. We'll start on the left-hand side around rule-based automation. These are really what we call structured automation, where if I'm sure many of you have played with Power Automate before, where you give it a very specific trigger and then you give it very specific steps to follow. And it always follows those steps, which is great, right? It's great for high reliability, high executability, all of that. But the problem is that when it faces something it doesn't know what to do, a new input perhaps, or maybe a decision path that wasn't expected, those automations break. And so these are these rigid predetermined rules that have ruled our automation landscape for the past 30 plus years. But they also can be a little rigid. And so we step up that spectrum. We then look at AI enhanced automation. These are still step-by-step automations, right? But sometimes you want to go in and replace an AI or replace a rigid step with maybe an AI powered step. And I'll give you a very specific example of this in a moment. Basically what you're doing is you're taking out some of the rigidity and you're giving AI the ability to analyze and to use judgment and reasoning on top of that. Now, both of those get executed through Power Automate today. But we have the other side of our automation spectrum, which is Copilot Studio. So Copilot Studio allows us to do agentic automation and then autonomous, or really what we're calling it now is event-driven automation, right? Where you're saying, hey, I'm not going to give you step-by-step what needs to happen. Instead, what I do is enable my agent to have natural language instructions that it follows in order to execute whatever task needs to be done. But it's also going to leverage these different knowledge sources and maybe some different APIs, maybe an MCP server, and maybe some other services in order to get that job done. And each run is going to look different than the other one because it's going to be based on what at real time is needed for that process. And so if we think about this, right, like most of our business processes, we kind of force them into a rigid structure. Like, oh man, how does, for example, our return process, how does that tend to look? A lot of times we end up getting stuck making it kind of rigid. A lot of times the return process isn't that simple, and we need judgment or reason or flexibility or maybe a different path than what's normally taken. And so this is where net new values come into our automation stack. So let's dive a little bit more specifically in structured automation and the role that it currently plays in the Power Platform. As most of you folks know, right, Power Automate is our structured automation tool, and that can be done through both our API-based approach, which we call cloud flows, or through our UI-based approach, which we call desktop workflows. And so those cloud flows is really where we started with Power Automate, being able to automate your business processes, again, in that step-by-step fashion, where you're spelling out every single piece that happens within that automation. And it allows us to add triggers and actions and then break off with different logic and routing logic. And this is, again, it's all going to be cloud-based and using APIs that are available as pre-built connectors or APIs that you folks then create a custom connector around. And then on the other side of Power Automate is our desktop workflows. And this is kind of the newer addition. It's been about 5 years, but a newer addition to the platform where we said, hey, we still need people to be able to automate against their legacy applications, against UIs that maybe don't have APIs, against browsers, things like that. And so Power Automate Desktop is our way of, again, still creating structured workflows where we're spelling out step-by-step what's happening, but now we're using the UI to do a lot of that automation. And so that's really been the footprint for automation within the Power Platform. But as I mentioned, as relied upon and as important as these workflows are, because they always execute the same way, meaning that they are very reliable in the sense that they're always going to provide execution, reliability, and control, especially in an industry that really is heavily focused on those things, it also can be fragile. So let me just give you a quick example here. Let's take a scenario of a customer service email routing. So I've created this workflow on the right-hand side here, and this automation has rules for email routing. It basically says, hey, if the email contains the term refund, then we're going to send that email and forward it on to the billing team. If that email contains the term order or purchase, then we want to send that to the sales team. And that's pretty good, right? That's probably a lot of your organizations have automations that are reliant on keyword filtering, right? However, it's no surprise that this automation is susceptible to breaking. So let's give you some scenarios. Where would that potentially break? Let's take the first one. What if the email contains none of those keywords, right? It didn't contain refund, order, or purchase. So then the workflow just breaks or it goes down a path that we didn't expect, right? What if the email contains multiple conflicting keywords? It contains both purchase, which should send us to the sales team, but it also contains refund, which should send us to the billing team, right? Our workflow would break. And lastly, what if the email contains a keyword, but it's misleading? Yeah, it says the word order. It says that person was charged twice. Hey, can you fix this? But order technically should send us to the sales team. But if we read that, we understand the context of that email. That is not a sales team problem. That is something that should go directly to our billing team. The outcome here is that while our businesses rely on a lot of these types of automations, the workflow logic becomes brittle and it becomes really hard to maintain over time. And so now looking at having things like Copilot Studio or having, AI into our workflows, we can actually enhance these workflows with AI-enabled steps. So what if we took out this rigid step-by-step process and allowed it to better understand the nuance that happens in email, better understand the deeper context of what it's doing, and then also just route emails with more confidence. And that's where, if we think about that spectrum again, moving into the second part of the spectrum, we're looking at AI enabled workflows, where you take an AI-powered step. We always call this AI Builder. We just kind of call it AI prompts now that can be used across the whole platform. But these are now, we could take these steps and put them in, and now instead of having this rigid logic, to route my emails. I'm instead saying, hey, based on the content of this email that I'm giving you, decide if this email should be routed to our billing team or sales team. And hey, if it doesn't fit either category, then just let us know that it's unknown. And I could give examples of emails where maybe it should go to billing or should go to sales. But now I'm removing a kind of rigid and almost archaic keyword search. And now I'm giving it deeper context. And so the outcome here is more flexibility and a higher success of proper routing. And so we think about, just taking a pause from the Microsoft terminology, when we think about where you folks are at, think about this from a perspective of where can you add AI-powered steps in your current workflows to make sure that they are stronger and more robust, right? And where do you have appetite or willingness to add in AI steps into your workflows, right? We're not talking agentic AI yet. This is still a pretty rigid and structured workflow, but we're just empowering it to use a little bit of AI to make a better routing and judgment and decision making. Now, the cool thing is that we have in Power Automate, and really the Power Platform, we can add these AI-powered steps to do many things. You saw one that's going to understand the context of an email to help with routing. We can do text summarization, we can do object extraction, we can do document analysis and pulling out key artifacts or key fields. We can look at synthesizing information, detecting anomalies. There's a ton of capabilities here to use AI to make your structured workflows just a little bit smarter and more resilient. And while RPA, or robotic process automation, is a little bit of an older tool, legacy tool, it is not to be confused with the fact that these are still heavily relied upon automations because they, again, are structured and they give us that reliability. But Microsoft is still invested in bringing AI capabilities to RPA. And so we have things like self-healing, which is what you're seeing in that screen or that video that's playing, which is basically, if any of you've ever worked with RPA, you know that those are so susceptible to breaking whenever the UI changes, right? Because you're telling the bot, hey, look for this blue button to click in order to submit the form. What if that button moves? What if the color changes? What if the XY coordinates change? And so what this does for self-healing is it actually will alert the user and say, hey, something changed here. Do you want me to continue to run this a certain way? And do you just want me to run that, apply this type of run to this, this one instance of a run? Or do you want me to change this for all future runs? So it's a really cool way to get that human in there to say, hey, something changed. Can we quickly address this so this workflow doesn't break? We've also brought Copilot, AI recorder, a lot of AI capabilities, as well as some of those AI models I just showed you on the last slide into RPA so that you can still do smart, intelligent analysis and summarization and all of that directly within our Power Automate desktop tool. Now, I'd like to cover the second part of the spectrum, which is around what we're calling adaptive automation, or maybe more of that agentic automation. And this is going to be done with Copilot Studio. Instead of having those steps that are very specifically laid out, instead we're relying on that orchestration layer to assist our agent and to guide it with the steps and all of the skills that we give our agent. So let's dive a little bit more into this. So Copilot Studio, I'm sure many of you are familiar with it at this point. These build agents that can be conversational, meaning that a user is going in and typing and communicating with it, or autonomous / we're kind of calling this event driven now, meaning, hey, I'm not interacting with it in a chat experience. Instead, it's running in the background and doing some of my business processes. And how do these work? If I'm not giving it step by step, right? How are these actually able to execute anything? Well, it does a couple different things. One, the big piece here is that it has an orchestrator, which decides at runtime which items need to be called at that specific given moment based on the instructions I give it. And then we give it knowledge and tools to basically say, hey, what information do you need in order to run this business process appropriately, and what data sources might you need to call? Let's dive a little bit deeper into agent knowledge. Agent knowledge is the sources where it's able to pull information from it. And this can be pulling information so that it can answer users' questions. It can also be pulling information just so that the agent can do analysis to make the best decision. Either way, these knowledge sources can be things like SharePoint sites, They can be uploaded files. They can be instances of Dataverse tables. It can come from public websites, or even from a lot of third-party tools like Jira, Confluence, ServiceNow, SAP, and so on. So really, again, knowledge is all about how do we give our agents, make them a little bit smarter by giving them these knowledge sources that they can reference so that they can make the right decision at runtime. Now, along with that, our agent can also have different tools. So yes, it can be smart by knowledge, but now we need our agent to actually do things. And so some of those things are using connectors. In the Power Platform world, we're very familiar with connectors. We use these all the time. These same connectors can be enabled for our agent. So it can go out and create a ServiceNow ticket, or get all of my recent emails, or update a record in SAP, right? All of those connectors are still available for us to use. We also have those AI prompts, make it easy for us to plug in an AI step into our agent so that I can do something like a summarization of a ticket, right? We can then also call agent flows. These are just, again, basically the Power Automate workflows that are predictable, structured automations within our agent. And of course, we have tons of MCP servers that we can call to make our agents just a little bit more flexible. And so rather than having to spell out every potential way it can use a certain API, instead we give it this open standard protocol to connect to those line of business services. And so all of those tools now take our agent to the next level by allowing them to do really connecting to our line of business services and doing a further synthesis. Now, I would love to kind of take a little tangent here and take a closer look at what we're calling agent flows. Now, agent flows and cloud flows, which are cloud flows from Power Automate, are very, very similar. You're probably going to see a convergence here, I'd imagine, with how these are working together. But basically, agent flows are that deterministic structured workflow you add to your Copilot Studio agent. Well, you might say, well, Amber, you just said that agents aren't deterministic. They're not structured. Yeah, but sometimes you need those. And so let's take this scenario that I have on the screen here around an IT service desk agent. So the agent, again, is understanding, for example, maybe a new email comes in and it's got ticket details in it. The agent's understanding the IT ticket details. It then goes out to a knowledge source to then identify the root cause and determine the resolution path, right? That's where we're leveraging the agent to do the reasoning and the judgment. And that's where the agent is fully needed. But once the agent decides what should happen, we'll invoke an agent flow or a cloud flow, right? And that flow then executes the task, doing things like, hey, reset a password, or update our ITSM system, or call this API, right? And again, we're leveraging that for execution and control. There are just times and places where we don't have appetite for AI to, for example, put in a new record into our CRM, our patient database, right? We might say, hey, no, that needs to be structured every time. It needs to always look the same way. Well, great, we can still use workflows, our structured workflows, to make sure we have that execution and that control. And then surround that with the agent experience so that, hey, there's still that reasoning and judgment when that is appropriate. And so really, you'll see a common thing here is that it's going to be the combination of these tools together that allow us to meet your needs. And yes, maybe sometime in the future, a lot of things will be more agentic, but right now it is going to be very common to see a hybrid approach where we are using still structured workflows where there is no flexibility or no appetite for AI, because we're working with things like patient data or whatever rules that you all have to adhere to. Or maybe it's just something where we need to know it runs the same way every single time. There's no room for reason and judgment. But you can imagine how net new value is going to be created when you can add reasoning and judgment to your workflows. And these are really going to be common, looking at your the processes that you do every day internally, right? Like your IT ticketing process, how you open up, maybe do HR scheduling. Like all of these are ripe for reinvention. And so yes, you'll see processes that can be maybe improved with AI, and this is a great place to start. You'll also have processes that get completely reinvented by this agentic approach. It's just all about choosing what's right for where you're currently at, and and what you're trying to work with. So Copilot Studio then allows us to take all of these agents and make them autonomous, or again, event driven, which you can see on the screen here, means adding a trigger and saying, hey, no one's going to be conversing with this agent necessarily. Instead, it's going to be running in the back end, pulling all the information together and then pulling a human in for any human in the loop activities that are required. It's still following the human guardrails. It's still using that orchestration layer. But again, it's more adaptive in nature, meaning it can produce different outcomes from the same inputs. So what does that actually mean or look like? Let's take an example of handling this end-to-end process for, this is a return process, right? And in this blue section down here, we see that a more traditional process is, hey, a customer asks for a refund. Hey, agent or the workflow says, hey, give me the customer information, and then we initiate the refund process. And it'd be great if every refund process could be that simple, but it really never is, right? Sometimes we need to look up the order details. And then, hey, maybe they didn't actually need a refund. They just need a troubleshooting guide sent to them so that we can save that sale and go ahead and give them information on how to get something set up if they purchased. Or maybe that person cancels the refund and then we need to follow up with them to make sure that their issue is fully resolved. So you can imagine, like, see how each run then takes a different path based on what the need is in that moment. It is not held to the super rigidness of our traditional automations in the past. So again, traditional automations tend to break when encountering roadblocks. They will follow those predefined rule-based flows, for better or for worse. But don't be mistaken, these are still very important because they're great for control over repetitive processes. Now, autonomous, though, it finds that workaround when encountering roadblocks, or it pulls that human into a system and whenever it finds that, and then learns along the way. And it decides, like I said, at runtime, which steps need to be taken in order to complete that specific job. These are really great for open-ended processes. So I imagine that hopefully a couple light bulbs are going off where people are saying, you know what, hey, this is a process that we've kind of, what's the saying, a square peg and round hole, or maybe it's opposite of that. And you've kind of forced it to fit a very specific structure. But I'm sure that you all have business processes that really aren't that rigid, and you need more open-endedness, and you need that reasoning and that judgment. Those are perfect to then think about, hey, how do we maybe move those to like an agentic AI approach and use something like Copilot Studio to do that. The other thing I want to mention is if there's any folks in here that are particularly interested in robotic process automation, or RPA, you probably are familiar with the term computer using agents, or what we call CUA. CUA is in Copilot Studio, and this is our way of still, again, using the UI to do the automation, just like we do in RPA. But instead of doing the step-by-step, hey, this is the XY coordinate text box value that you click on for this text box, and then you enter in this data. Instead, again, we're giving it natural language instructions and saying, hey, you're going to go to this website. You're going to click on the option to download the report. So you're going to select the 90-day report. Now I'm not relying on UI selectors to find all those elements. I'm actually using computer vision to go in there, and then using an AI model on top of it to assess, okay, now what's the next step based on the instructions that the author gave me. So this is something really cool. I have a couple customers that are on the bleeding edge exploring how this is adding net new value to their automations, especially when it comes to UI automation. And it's a really cool space to explore. So as I kind of am starting to wrap up my section here, I hope that this is a brief example or summary of where Microsoft's headed with this two-pronged approach for automation. Where again, we have Power Automate for automating those well-defined tasks and processes, and will still continue to be a pinnacle or an important part of our automation stack, because it allows us to create workflows that are that have proven automation capabilities and still follow those predefined rules and steps. However, Copilot Studio is really kind of changing the game and adding net new value for us in some of our areas for workflow automation, because we're creating agents that now and automations that can plan, that adapt, that reason based on the dynamic context that it's receiving in real time. And so we can do things like autonomous decision making, and where agents can interpret data, that it can pull in humans in the loop when needed. It has adaptive learning. And instead of saying, it having step-oriented behavior, it has goal-oriented behavior. We're focused on the goals to achieve. Hey, successfully onboard this vendor while meeting compliance. Instead of saying you first do step 1, then you do step 2, then you do step 3. Instead, we're saying this is your goal. Use whatever tools you need in your arsenal to get that done. So this is end-to-end the unified automation platform that we have within the Microsoft space. And I hope that this brings a little bit of light into how you can rethink the automations that you have in your organization and the capabilities that Copilot Studio can add for net new value. I'm going to pause there and then hand it back over to Scott and Randall for any closing thoughts.
Thank you, Amber. I'm kind of curious. I think you covered some of it, but one of the first questions I always get, right, is like when to use what. And I'm curious what your response to something like that is, if it really sticks to kind of the deterministic versus flexible, or I've mentioned to folks like kind of failing down the stack, trying to use the most simple tool. I'm curious if you have a perspective on that.
Yeah, I think both of the things you just said are relevant, right? I think to me, coming from a mindset of, I work with a lot of folks in health and life sciences, even in financial services, in the government. So to me, I'm always thinking, what can I do with the highest level of reliability, execution, right? So a lot of times I'll start with a structured automation, but now that I look at processes that maybe don't follow those rigid paths, then I start to think, okay, is there an appetite or is there ability to use AI here, right? And a lot of times we'll have to go through maybe an AI risk process to get that done. But when you think about the net new value that it's going to add to have a process that is truly more flexible and hopefully requires less humans to have to intervene during that, I think that value is worth the time and effort to go through that. So it's really all about where do you need that reasoning and that judgment and that adaptability versus where is structure totally fine and it still solves the purpose, right? Those are still great. Power Automate will still have a place, I think, in everybody's landscape because structure is still desired and needed along the way.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And I was asking a bit of a leading question too, because I think the other two resources you have there now is one, you have Microsoft, right? So come to us, bring your, but what Randall and I have, and I think Amber to some degree as well, like to do is spend our time like helping translate the business process into the technology stack necessary for it, right? So don't feel like you have to perfectly execute or draw up the pattern with the product names and things like that. That's really where your Microsoft account teams and sales teams can help you to sort of kind of roughly map these things out. The other one that I always really encourage people to use, and it's something I've seen a ton of value from, is using Copilot to kind of get ideas and synthesize those ideas, maybe get them a little bit further down the line. Microsoft's kind of strategy for training and education, we have this community of MVPs, most valuable professionals out there, that are putting out so much content that is basically able to kind of train our co-pilots to be even smarter. So if you're you open up that Cloudflow Designer, for example, or Agent Flow Designer, and it's not quite making sense, or you're not sure what syntax it wants, or you're not sure exactly how to give it the reasoning or logic, inputs that it requires. Try to explain in natural language what's going on with your Copilot. See if it can get you those step-by-step instructions to get unstuck. I think it might surprise you sometimes because we have so much readily available kind of education material in our Learn documents in our community. It can be really helpful to kind of unlock some of these things and get you rolling.
Yeah, and I think we might have some folks here that are maybe thinking about, okay, how do I govern this, right? I think that we're actually in a really beautiful spot as folks that are in the low code space to understand how to govern this, because we've thought about innovation at scale, right? We've started to give people these tools to start innovating, and AI does now accelerate that, right? But we've started to think about how all this can fit into our organization. And so, yes, there will be tooling out there like Agent 365, which will do a phenomenal job at helping us manage all of this. But I encourage you to start thinking about how does your governance not completely reshape, but how does just kind of restructure itself a little bit to fit this new agentic model, and how does your how does that change maybe any risk processes that you have to go through, or where do you have, I keep using the term like appetite, but where does the business have appetite to use AI versus what are the data types or the parts of the business that are just like, nope, no AI in this type of data right now. Like, that's totally fine. I know Microsoft, we're all about the AI stuff right now, but it is okay to like have a phased approach where maybe something starts as the Power Automate workflow, and then eventually, as we start to get more into the AI world and we start to open up more tooling at your organization, then maybe that starts to shift into having like an AI step in it, right? And then we open that up to maybe an agentic process. But it's all about using a hybrid approach that makes the most sense for your organization. And again, Scott, Randall, Jake, and I are here to assist you guys on that journey and help figure out where it makes sense for your organization.
And we're able to tap into, this product and platform is not new. So we have 7 years of maturity and that governance and things like ALM and good practice. So I think it's a great point. We've got one more question here in the QA, Amber. I'm curious your perspective on it. I have one as well. What is the future of using AI prompts and actions in a Power Automate flow? Is it all going to be agent flows, or will those other kind of discrete actions still exist going forward?
Well, I think adding an AI step into a structured workflow, into like a Power Automate workflow, is great, because you're not losing that structure. You're just adding a little bit of intelligence into a structured automation. And I think there's a lot more appetite and willingness to do that right now within organizations. And so I think that solves a very specific need. And then using those in things like an agent flow, like you'll still use those to do things like, hey, I'm going to give you a ServiceNow ticket, and I want you to synthesize across these 17 fields, synthesize it and give it to me in 2 sentences. What's this person's problem and how do we think we can solve it, right? That's still something that we can use directly in an agent. So an agent can call that automation, or that AI prompt, excuse me, to go and get that done. So I think that there's definitely still a space for this. But Scott, I'd love your thoughts too.
I was going to kind of give a tease, I guess. So it's a fantastic question. And I think I would, in covering myself a little bit, I would say maybe tune into Build next week and keep an eye on some of those announcements and come in with that question. I definitely think we're going to continue to provide optionality. I don't think you'll see any experience that we offer today go away anytime soon. I think what the direction that I'm seeing us going is where we can make the creation experience easier. We're doing that. So I think you'll see even something like an agent flow, which if you have some experience and expertise building agent flows, it can be very easy and quite amazing what you can accomplish, but it can still be an intimidating first entry point for a brand new user. I think we're trying to democratize that experience a little bit. I still think that there's been enough effort and engineering that goes into an AI prompt. So if anything, you might see the way that it gets invoked subtly change, or the experience subtly change, but I don't think we'll see rapid whole-scale pivots from Microsoft. I think you'll see kind of iterative improvements on the experience and the ways that you can assemble all of these different tools. If you think about them as tools or skills, whatever you want to call them, it'll just be kind of unique and hopefully new, cutting edge, easier to use ways to invoke them. So, checking my chat one more time. All right, then if there are no other questions, you have another moment or two to get them in. Otherwise, I'll close with kind of a reminder. We're here each month. We have a to be determined topic right now, so I don't have a presenter for you next month. I think if I don't find somebody, we'll probably come and talk about those build announcements and maybe field some questions on what might be changing or what might be new there, when we can talk a little bit more openly and freely. I don't want to spoil anything. I encourage you to find us on LinkedIn, find previous sessions on our YouTube channel. And then a huge thank you to Amber for joining us to present today, and for you all for joining us and spending some time with us. You can find our latest event at that aka.ms link if you're looking for us, and hopefully we'll see you around here around the fourth Thursday of every month. Thanks a lot for the time, everyone.